Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Haj-Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more important than that, we're very good friends. I don't even need to confirm that with Ben. I just know it as fact. Right, Ben? Wait, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
We're such good friends, I'm going to let Ben handle the podcast from now on and tell you where you can find all of his latest work. Ben, go for it.
You can find my work at Motor Trend, at Hirety, and at driving.ca.
And you can find my work at driving.ca, autotrader.ca, and Capital One's Auto Navigator. Ben, we've got an EV to talk about, one that I've discussed in the past, and one that you get to handle with a completely different perspective than I had, right?
Yeah, I think we talked about it just over a month ago, and that's the Fiat 500e. And the reason we're talking about it again is because Sami lives in civilization, aka Hamilton, and as a result, a small range-limited hatchback electric like the Fiat 500e might make some sense, because this is a car that isn't intended, like, the reason I say might make some sense is because really Fiat built this car for one reason, and that's because they legally had to. We've talked about compliance cars in the past, specifically with the Fiat 500e. There's regulations in the United States, places like California, and states that follow the California Air Resource Board regulations that require car companies to build and sell, not just build, but also sell a certain number of emissions-free vehicles every year. So if you're a company like Fiat and your portfolio largely consists of Ram, Jeep, and Dodge, there's not a lot you have going for you on the electric side. So you bring in a vehicle like this. It's a redesigned version of the Fiat. And in fact, it's the only version of the Fiat available in North America. The gas version did not get a redesign. They're going all in on the 500e. But that being said, this vehicle isn't entirely new because it was on sale in Europe, I think, for 3 or 4 years, Sami?
Yeah, it looks like a new generation to us because it's been so long since we've had a modern-looking Fiat 500. But this has been around in other markets for, I think 2 or 3 years already.
So in theory, it's a tried and tested design.
Yeah, it should be sorted out by the time it gets here. But this is Fiat we're talking about, right?
Sure. So back to what I said about this is a vehicle they need to sell. The price of this vehicle, it starts at like $34,000 and goes up to $37,000. And in Canada, it starts at $42,000 and it can go up to just under $50,000. But the reality is, in Canada anyway, is about $10,000 worth of rebates if you live in Quebec or Ontario. Plus, there's consumer cash from Fiat. In the U.S., it's truly wild what you can do in terms of getting one of these in your driveway. In Canada, for example, this is one of the few vehicles right now that has easy 0% financing, something we haven't seen in a long time because of how high interest rates have been. But in the United States, the lease rates on these vehicles are out of this world. Sami, someone a couple of weeks ago posted that you could get a Fiat 500e in Colorado for $19 a month.
Yeah, I've heard about this. What a great deal. That's better than a bus pass, man.
That's it. I mean, arguably, yes.
How is it not?
Well, you don't have to insure a bus pass, and you don't have to wash a bus pass, and a bus pass is never going to go to art school and not get a job, right? So it's different when you have a 500e. But anyway, that's crazy. To lease a new car, I don't really have the details of that lease. I don't know how much money down is required, but it's still the kind of number that makes you go, well, why don't I have a 500e, right?
Yes.
Sami, why don't I have a 500e?
Mainly because the range might not accommodate your needs, right?
Let's talk about that range.
Sure.
So in Canada, where I live, we measure range in kilometers. The car ostensibly has a 220 kilometer range. In the United States, I believe it's rated at something like, let me double check this number.
I think it's 160.
No, it's 141 miles.
Okay, sure.
Now that is 70 or 80 miles lower than I think anything else that's out there, right? Except for the Mini, the electric Mini. Yep. So already you're dealing with a vehicle that is substantially hobbled. The reason for that is it's tiny. This is a very tiny car. It doesn't weigh a ton like many EVs.
Tiny cars have tiny batteries.
Exactly. And as a result of that, I'm trying to figure out find the exact size of this battery. I don't have
I had 42 kilowatt hours.
That makes a lot of sense. It's 117 horsepower and I think like 120 something pound-feet of torque. Going back to me picking this car up and then driving the 130 kilometers or 80 miles to my home from the fleet location, it had a 75% charge when I picked it up. So
that's the worst.
that translated into like, I guess something
180?
like 100 miles or 95 miles of driving, which should have given me a cushion of like, 10, 15 miles. So it was a bit cold, not terribly cold, but that's going to exact something of a toll on the vehicle. It was raining, so I had, headlights on, I had the wipers on.
Wipers are notorious for sapping energy.
I know, crazy, especially the giant wipers on the Fiat 500e.
I'm just kidding, but every little thing counts, even just like charging your phone, like fast charging your phone or something like that.
I don't know if the phone makes a difference.
Oh yeah, huge.
You think so?
I'm always plugging stuff into my EVs to see how long they last.
What about the blender test?
Yeah.
Making a margarita out there on the road in the backseat.
600-watt blender, of course.
So I got to within like 10 minutes of my house and the range dropped down to 11%. And the screen started flashing all this stuff at me like, warning, charge battery low, some features may not function.
11% does not seem that bad, I suppose.
It was
from a percent wise, right? But
it was like
that's
15 miles left.
And how much more time did you have in your
I had like another 5 or 6 miles to go.
That's not bad. You knew you had a distance. You could make it.
But do you trust it? Like, how gas gauges, they're not accurate when they get down to the lower levels. I remember a friend of mine growing up had an E30 325 BMW. And, every car today has like a reserve tank, I guess you could call it. So
the reserve, that's what it's called. It's I love that.
When you get to the reserve in his E30, it would be like at E on the or whatever. I don't think BMW used letters. It was like 1 and 0 and stuff.
1 and 0. That's my favorite.
When it would get to like 0, another gas gauge would appear like in red, and then you could go through that, and it was like a finer grade, right? But you don't really have that today. So when you get to 0, or at least in a lot of my cars, when you get to 0 or near 0, you're playing with fire. You don't know where you actually are. And so I often think about this when I'm driving an electric vehicle. It's like, how accurate is it estimating right now? And what's that estimate based on? And like, the percentages start to matter when you only have like 10 miles left, like if it's off by 50%, you might not make it home.
Yeah, 100%. But I think, things are getting much more advanced, and, there's a way for these cars to probably, for them to probably understand what your recent driving behaviors have been like, the conditions outside, and can probably give you a more accurate idea or feeling of what's happening outside. For the range. My main concern though is that, like you said, the reserve is usually like what, 10% of the the tank.
It's a small amount.
Usually 5 or 10%.
Are you saying
that's easy to
like
calculate?
A second reserve battery that gets tapped in?
Yeah, a couple of double A's that we could throw in somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think 10% of your battery makes sense. And it's also worth pointing out that a lot of batteries have like these buffers, these inaccessible parts of the battery. So when I say it's 42 kilowatt hour battery, it might not actually be that. It might actually be close to like 38 or something like that.
Yeah.
In order to preserve the lifespan of the battery based on its expected lifespan. Because charging a battery all the way up to 100% or discharging it all the way to 0, not including those buffers, can degrade the battery significantly.
The thing about going all the way to 0 in an EV is unless you're at a charger, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not a situation that most people will ever find themselves in.
But it is concerning to me. Like, what did it never got like serious about what, it never got particular about what could potentially be happening to you.
It never told me that, but it's instructive to look at this car's drive modes, because they kind of reveal that the people at Fiat are well aware of the limitations of the vehicle. So there's a normal drive mode, there's a mode called range, and there's a mode called Sherpa.
I love that. I mean, you're right. That was a great way to put it. It's very indicative of how they perceive their vehicle. Other cars have, eco mode, normal mode, and sport mode.
Yeah,
there's no sport mode in a
comfort
Fiat
mode.
500.
Yeah, that's what I thought was odd. The fact that there's no sport mode in a vehicle that in the past has been marketed as something that's fun to drive. And I thought that was kind of a miss for this model. But normal and range, normal is pretty much what it says on the tin. Range gives you one pedal driving to one degree or another, like more aggressive regen. And then you get to Sherpa. Sherpa limits your speed to 50 miles an hour or 80 kilometers an hour.
Sherpa.
You can push past it, because I put it in Sherpa at first and I didn't know what Sherpa did, and I needed to be going faster than 80 because I was merging onto a highway.
Yeah, I did that. I've done that.
I'm like, what's going on? Nothing's happening. And then I pushed and pushed, and finally it was like, you are exceeding Sherpa mode, and I ended up getting up to highway speed, so I turned it off. But it also kills the heating controls.
Yeah, the climate control goes kaput there. Yeah,
and your acceleration level, like, let alone the fact that you have this 80 kilometer an hour, 50 mile an hour limit, it also limits your acceleration.
Yeah, it dulls it significantly. Which again, first of all, with this much torque in a 500e, it gets up to speed pretty quickly. I never found that the Sherpa mode was particularly limiting in like day-to-day driving around town on a highway or a country road for sure.
Yeah, you can't use it in any other situation, which makes it weird because in theory, if you're in town, you should be near a charger, right? Like there should be something.
Or you have enough range to get around. Like for me, I had a relatively positive experience in the 500e because all of my errands were within, like, let's say a 10 to 20 mile radius. And then on the weekends, I'm going to a big city like Toronto, which is 50 miles away, or my parents' place, which is about 30 miles away. And the car can make that trip back and forth without any concerns, right? So
if it was, I don't know, man. I mean, if it was really cold, I would be worried. A 60-mile round trip.
You're right. That is different when it's colder. And we do see some serious temperature drops here. So it's my biggest concern is what this vehicle will be like in the winter. Yeah. But specifically during my experience with the vehicle, I never was worried about how much range it had. But the other aspects of the vehicle really hit me, especially when we talked about pricing. So I don't know if we'll do that just yet. I don't know.
Not yet, no, because I still want because on my side of the equation, range was all I could think about with this vehicle.
Exactly. Yeah, because I totally understand you on this.
Living outside of a city, this is a useless vehicle. This is not something you want to own. It was not designed for that. And I knew that going in, and I wanted to see what it would be like. So if you're someone who lives in a city and you're looking for a runabout EV, and you're considering also doing day trips outside the city, don't pick this vehicle.
100%. There's a checklist. You need to be like, are my regular commutes or errands within like 30 miles? Do I have a second car for long trips?
Yeah,
or an alternative
this is very much
either
entirely a city car that never leaves city limits, or and I mean like normal city limits, not like LA city limits where it's like enormous. But I mean, a city that's not a huge sprawl. That's what this is oriented towards. Or it's a toy that's only driven in very specific situations and you don't have to rely on it. If you don't have to rely on it, you'll probably be fine. But it is an expensive vehicle to own. If you can't drive, it's expensive to own a vehicle like this that you can't drive all the time. And I don't really think there's anything about it that makes it desirable enough to own it as a second vehicle, unless you were specifically looking to commute in the city.
It makes me sad because I actually really appreciated a lot of the parts of this car, with the exception of that range element. So if this was, let's say, a range extended EV or like whatever you want to call it, like plug-in hybrid, or even just a small Turbo 4 or Turbo 3, it would be a pretty cool car, I think.
I mean, if it was like the old Fiat 500 gas model, it would be a cool car. I mean, I guess. But compare it to something like, say, a BMW i3, which I thought was actually pretty fun to drive. This is not really fun or engaging. It's perfectly fine. But there's nothing about it that makes it feel nimble or interesting. Like, I think it's mostly a styling exercise. I think people like the design on the outside. On the inside, you're not getting much. Like, it's okay. I guess it feels much more economy on the inside than it looks on the outside.
Right.
And that might rub some people the wrong way. I also had some trouble with some of the switchgear, like changing battery modes and stuff, drive modes, it was difficult. It didn't always respond to what I'm trying to get it to do.
It's like laggy?
Yeah, like laggy, like push the button, nothing happens. Twist the dial, nothing happens. That was frustrating. Also, what was weird about this vehicle, and this is maybe just the one I had, but in order to start it, you have to put your foot on the brake and push the start button. So I did that all the time.
Yep.
Obviously, because it's trained into you as a driver.
And then you have to do it again or something? Yeah.
Yes, because I was not pushing the pedal hard enough. I would push it, it would turn on, so the vehicle is on, but it's not in a driving state. It's only like, accessory. And you don't get that, you don't realize that until you try to shift it. I would hit the button shifters on the dash, and it would say, cannot execute this shift, turn on vehicle. So then I would have to push it again and turn it on again. So I had to train myself to like make sure I was pushing the brake pedal really hard when I pushed the start. So that was a little weird.
I can't remember if I had that same issue or if it was turning it off that was weird for me, that you have to turn it off twice.
No, I didn't have to turn mine off twice.
Maybe I'm mistaking it for the turning it on twice. Okay.
It's really tiny inside.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
What do you mean kind of?
I don't know.
Name a car with a smaller interior that has a rear seat.
Fine. I got
Can you do it?
Okay. Yeah, like any of those 86s or Toyota Baru twins.
You think an 86 rear seat is smaller?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I put a child seat in the back of the press 500e.
I put my wife in the back seat of this car, and it involved a lot of adjusting of the seat for her brother, who's like 6 foot, to manage to, or closer to 6 foot, to sit in front of her.
Right.
It was a challenge. In terms of cargo, it's also not great. There's really no trunk space unless you fold the rear seat flat. Yep. I folded the rear seat flat, and I was able to fit 1,000 CDs.
Just loose CDs?
No, they were inside Apple crates, cardboard Apple crates. So I was able to put like 5 crates in the back and 2 crates on the front seat. But you can't stack them because the seats don't fold flat in the back. So if you're loading any cargo, it's at an angle. And once you start stacking boxes, they slide into each other. Yeah. And it ended up where I had too many boxes stacked in the back and I couldn't close the hatch.
Okay.
So yes,
useless. Great.
You can haul 1,000 CDs, but you gotta kind of Jenga / Tetris it around.
I mean, and the same thing. You could put a baby seat in the back, but there's no front passenger, like it's not functional at that point.
So really what you're saying is it's a 2-person vehicle,
whether no matter where you put
an adult or an infant.
Yeah, no matter where you put them.
And as I mentioned, it drives okay. Like, it's fine. I don't have any complaints about the driving experience itself. Mine didn't have adaptive cruise. I don't know if that's a feature that's available with this vehicle. I thought that was a little weird, especially given that the price point that it costs at. What an awful sentence. Like,
that's okay. This is proof that we don't write what we're saying before we say it on the podcast.
Terribly constructed sentence. I can't recommend this vehicle. I think that if you're looking at pricing, if you spend like $4,000 more, you can get an Ioniq 6, which is an outstanding automobile in pretty much every way.
If you want tons of range, way faster to charge.
If you want to spend
more spacious, it has you could put 4 people in it without sacrificing anyone.
Sure, and if you want to spend less money, you can get a Nissan Leaf for like $5,000 less. The Leaf is not amazing, but it does have a 4-seat opportunity inside. It has more cargo space. Your range is going to be higher, even though it's not great. It will still beat the 500e. I don't know who this car is for. Like, if you are going to buy an urban runabout, why not just buy a Leaf? Like, it's so much better.
Yeah, isn't it? Fair. I think that's a good point. But the Leaf is just feeling really dated these days.
I guess, but isn't having 120 or 140 miles of range also dated? Like,
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
it bugs me. Yeah.
I mean, we get like this all the time when we're talking about EVs because we complain about pricing of them. Now, let's talk to me about the pricing of this again.
Well, I already mentioned it earlier, but it starts at 34 and it goes up to like into the 40s.
So a few weeks ago, I talked about the Volvo
into the 40s, but
the Volvo EX30, which starts at around 30 something, and is a far better driving experience, but has its own issues in terms of infotainment capabilities and interior human machine interface, I suppose is the marketing term. Just the infotainment was really a pain in the butt to use.
So I think what we're running into here is the CX30. That's what it was.
EX30. The
EX30, yes. Yeah. So the EX30 was designed for a customer, with a customer in mind, but the Fiat 500e was designed with a specific business need in mind. Right. It was not intended, and You know, we talk about how this has been on sale in Europe for a few years. Europe has a vastly different driving situation than most of North America.
And EV infrastructure too.
Sure. But I mean, just in terms of the distances that are traveled, like everything is much closer. Cities are closer together. And inside of cities, you have space constraints that we don't necessarily have in North America. So a smaller vehicle like this makes more sense. Out here, even inside cities, it's hard to recommend it because of the prices available to other vehicles. In a world where you're not parking in the world's tiniest alley, why not get an Ioniq 6 for more money and be able to have a fully featured car? So that's kind of, you know, when you build a car for legal reasons, you don't often end up with the best results.
The main issue is compromise, right? I mean, the North American market needs to have the least amount of compromise. It needs to offer you good range, and good space or functionality for a reasonable price.
I mean, it's not necessarily compromise in Europe if you don't need the range. It's not a compromise.
That's fair. Sure. That's what I'm saying is that like sometimes, I mean, we talk about why certain vehicles can't work between markets. And this is one of them that really makes sense because there's a ton of small EVs in Europe that seem really attractive, but just would not survive the usability in city. Maybe if our cities improved and, you know.
No, but even if our cities quote unquote improved, you're still hours and hours of driving away between one city and the next. Like that is an issue that is not a European issue.
Yeah, I forget about this. I mean, like multi-hour road trips are not uncommon in North America, right? Like hundreds of miles are not uncommon.
And in Europe, if you don't want to drive, obviously you could drive hundreds of miles to a different city, but you could also take a train.
Or you could take really cheap Ryanair flights somewhere or something like that, right?
Sure, but I mean, I think a train is a much cheaper and more practical option than flying.
Sure, yeah.
And that's a specifically European type of infrastructure that we don't have here. We have flights. We have, you know, fairly robust.
Not cheap.
No, but fairly robust. I'm not saying it's cheap in Europe, but it's fairly robust compared to our rail, which is absolutely nothing, you know? So again, it's a car that wasn't designed for here and it was brought here for legal reasons. And now we have to deal with it. So my advice is I actually talked to a friend of mine who owns one of these this week and he doesn't hate it because he's using it for how it was intended to be used.
Exactly. Yeah.
But he I believe, it's just hard for me to get behind that as a general recommendation. I don't think it's a good idea.
No, man, you need to know the point of what we're saying is that you need to know the limitations of this vehicle and what it's costing you to accept those limitations or to live within those limitations.
And the fact that it's priced at a point where you could get a limitations-free vehicle.
Yes.
For the same, less, or more.
For 10%. Let's call it 10% more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's worth stretching for, you know? But also you could get a Leaf for like 10% less and not stretch at all.
That's a great point. Yeah. The Leaf, I mean, we used to, I mean, I'm going to bring up the Bolt because we talk about the Bolt every time we talk about cheap EVs because the Bolt was the last acceptable cheap EV, I think is the best way to put it. But the Leaf is the closest thing we have to that, right?
Yeah.
I just feel bad for the Leaf because I think it has this fast charging infrastructure that isn't supported really. The CHAdeMO system?
Yeah.
And that is going to, I don't know how much future there is in CHAdeMO in North America, right?
Probably zero.
Probably zero, considering everyone is switching to NACS here.
But I'm sure there's some kind of adapter already out there, or there will be an adapter. You know,
adapters scare me, man. Like, I don't know. I've read so many weird stories about the adapters.
We just don't buy cheap adapters, and you'll be fine.
On Reddit. Well, some of them are getting them free from like automakers.
Oh yeah, I think nothing Ford is cheaper than free, Sammy.
I think Ford is giving away free ones. And anyways, from what I understand, some Tesla people are not really stoked about seeing non-Tesla vehicles at their charging stations. So
I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't. I don't live my life under the banner of what will a Tesla owner think of what I'm doing.
Sure, but I'm always afraid of being the minority, so that's it. I'm going to switch gears here.
All right. I see what you did there.
This week, I'm heading out to the LA Auto Show. I'm not driving a car, which is always a funny thing about any of the press events that we do. Instead, Volkswagen is bringing me there to take a closer look at its updated 2025 Tiguan, which is their compact SUV that competes with in one of the most tightly contested market in a tightly contested segment in our market. So
once this episode's been released, the vehicle will be already available, right? Not available, sorry.
Yes.
It will have been announced and people will be able to look at pictures and stuff.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like,
yeah, it'll be published.
we're recording this before the vehicle's announced.
Now, the way this works is usually the automakers will give us a little teaser. They'll show us a couple of photos. They'll tell us a little bit of information. So I can give you some, spec sheets and some information that to give you a better idea of what Volkswagen is presenting, so that when this episode launches, it's current. Okay, so this is a little bit of insider baseball. I didn't know why Ben would be telling people about this, but okay, here we go. This is basically, I think, a new generation Tiguan. This is the third gen Tiguan is what Volkswagen is describing it as. It is based on a new platform, which is kind of like an evolved version of the MQB platform. So they call it MQB Evo. That makes sense. One of the biggest complaints that I think people have with the Tiguan is just that it feels a little, I think it feels a little low. What's the word I'm looking for? It just doesn't feel up to the standards quality-wise and tech-wise to some of its competition. So the most successful products in this segment include the Honda CR-V, which is super spacious and really reliable, very efficient, and then the Toyota RAV4, which is offered with a couple of different powertrains and is known for its epic reliability, essentially. The Tiguan does not change what it is. There's only one powertrain here. It's been upgraded slightly, and now it makes 201 horsepower as opposed to 184. It's a little bit lighter, and Volkswagen says that all of this will combine to make a more fuel-efficient vehicle. Time will tell. I don't know. And then design-wise, exterior design-wise, it looks a lot closer to the ID4. So
it's kind of like a merger of like an ID4 and a Golf.
Yeah. So it's got, that big LED light bar that spans the front of the vehicle in the headlights, and then on the rear there's also a light bar as well. So it's attractive looking, I think. The major concern will come with the interior, because Volkswagen has been really heavily criticized with its interiors, mainly because they've included a lot of touch-sensitive controls that are not lit up at night.
Yeah, it's like an extreme cost-cutting measure. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Now, there aren't any photos that demonstrate that there are backlit controls here. It does look like they're still using heavily, they're still heavily reliant on touchscreens here, and even have like a drive mode controller with a screen on it in the center console, which makes no sense.
You have to describe this to me.
It's a circular screen that you rotate, and when you rotate it, the screen itself will say, sport mode, snow mode,
so
normal
when my
mode.
hand's over top of it,
yeah, you won't see what
the eye on my hand is seeing what's on the screen.
That's right. I'm sure that there'll be a screen that pops up on the. I'm sure there'll be a notification that pops up on the central display.
So it's entirely redundant.
Yeah, of course. This is called atmospheres, these kind of things. So then it's got a ton of what's it called? Ambient lighting that spans the whole car. There's a pretty impressive, I think it's a pretty impressive ambiance that it creates. You could, depending on the trim level, you can get 10 or 30 color ambient lighting, which
let's talk about ambiance in a car.
Yeah.
What does it do for you, really? As a driver, does it do anything, or is this something that only passengers can appreciate?
I actually think that it adds a bit of personality or personification in the car.
Lights
like
on
my
your
favorite
feet?
colors are like purple or whatever, and I can have the car reflect that. A lot of people customize their vehicles based on their personalities or their preferences, so why not have that built into the vehicle from the get-go? I dig that.
How many people out there are putting LED lights inside their cars?
Come on, this used to be a major thing when we were younger.
No, you're thinking about underneath the cars, the neon
in
glow.
the car too. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I mean,
do you think it's better to have them outside the car than inside the car?
I don't really think it's a better or worse situation. I think I like ambient lighting. I do in my own home. I enjoy it. I don't have a problem with it in cars. But it seems funny to me that it's just become this thing where now oh yeah, you can change the color of the car, and I admit it is cool and I like it, but when did that become something that was a selling feature? When were people you know what, I really want this blue backlighting or this this purple backlighting. And how much more expensive does it make cars to repair? I've never really thought about that until now.
I don't know if they make cars more expensive to repair, because I don't know how much damage can be inflicted on some of these LED lights within the vehicle. But You're right. I mean,
challenge accepted, I guess.
But
Sammy,
I don't know. I think
how many miles of range does the ambient lighting take away from the Fiat 500e?
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning. We should give that a go. I'm impressed with their design, interior and exterior design. I just have to see whether or not these controls are backlit or not. And I don't know if I love the fact that it's still using the same turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. Just it has more power, which I guess makes it still have less than like a GTI. Many of its other like rivals have multiple engine options. Not to mention like a plug-in hybrid or a standard hybrid, right? Like the Hyundai Tucson and the Kia Sorento, both not Sorento, Sportage, both offer plug-in versions and normal hybrid versions, and this is still only offered with a turbocharged 4-cylinder. I mean, I think we're missing things here for Volkswagen to really succeed in getting a lot of these sold.
It really feels like Volkswagen is a brand in trouble in North America. The lineup has been shrinking. They've been losing vehicles, and the ones that were supposed to come in to replace it, the electric ones, they either took forever to get here or probably aren't going to arrive ever. Like if you think
you're talking about that sedan, what is it called? ID7?
ID7. So the ID4 came, and I guess at that time they had removed the Arteon. That's gone, right?
I believe the Arteon is gone. Yeah.
And so is the Golf. Yep. And so you remove those,
but not the Golf R or the GTI.
Yeah, those are still here, and the Jetta is still around. But the whole lineup
is very affordable. The Jetta is among, we talk about expensive cars. The Jetta is among the more affordable options in the.
But you end up with a lineup that's based on the Jetta, 2 versions of the Atlas, the Tiguan, and the Taos, which I guess is supposed to replace the Golf in the way that small compact hatchbacks that are marketed as crossovers replace actual compact hatchbacks. I don't know. But we got ID4, and then we were supposed to get the ID Buzz, the cool van looking thing. And that took forever to get here, like years.
The Buzz is finally here, and
it's not on sale yet, though.
Well, I mean, the media has finally driven it.
Yeah. But it was supposed to be here like 2 or 3 years ago. I believe it's been in Europe for at least 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And the ID7 also on sale in Europe, not here. So it's really strange what Volkswagen is doing. Shrinking the lineup, not replacing things. And like you said, when we do get stuff from them, we're truncating the lineup. Like the Jetta is still available in thrifty version and sporty GLI version. Although, sporty is it's a turn of phrase when you're talking
with
about
a 10,000 price difference between the two of them, by the way.
But when you look at the Golf, that's no longer the case. Like now it's just GTI or Golf R. So the winnowing of options has occurred nearly across the board. And I know that Volkswagen's facing a ton of economic pressures in the European market. They've been trying to close factories. They've been running into legal problems associated with that. The market in Europe is just tanking in general. And they've never really made a lot of money in North America, if any money. So
come on. When the Jetta showed up, that was like their thing. They really killed it with the Jetta when it first showed up.
I think,
and several years of that helped significantly. And I also feel like the Atlas was a bit of a winner for them when it first appeared on the market.
I think you might be surprised, though, if you look at the history of Volkswagen in North America. I think in the last 25 years, they've had 2 years where they turned a profit.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not exaggerating.
That must be when the Jetta showed up, maybe when the Atlas showed up.
So it's not been great for them in North America. Like they've historically not done well here, even though it seems like they have. Like financially, it doesn't pan out, and I just not sure what the future holds. Like, is it going to be an electrified future? If so, why hasn't it happened? And why are they dragging their feet? If it's going to be an all crossover feature, SUV future, then why is the GLI and the Jetta still there? Like it's just kind of a not a cohesive situation for them.
Well, it's even more interesting when you go to Europe. You'll notice that not only are there Volkswagens, but there's Seat, there's Skoda, and there's I think there's another brand out there that is also very related. They all have such similar platforms and powertrains and interiors, and I'm sure they're built on similar lines or whatever, that helps them differentiate or accommodate different price points or markets or design languages. And they just don't have that here, right? They just have to hit these Volkswagen. They just have to hit the most broad customer they can with all these Volkswagen models.
And why do you think they haven't been able to do what Toyota and Honda have been able to do? Is it simply because the reliability has never been there?
I don't know if it's never been there, but it's like these are considered to be more expensive to repair. A lot of European brands are like that, and that carries reputation for sure. I think that's part of it. But I've known a lot of Volkswagen faithful.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the faithful, because that's an entirely different thing. Like when you're making an emotional decision to buy a vehicle versus the cold calculating, I'll buy a Toyota because my neighbor has a Toyota and it's never caused them any problems. You know, like I feel like that's maybe how you grow market.
So you think just by earning a reputation, how long did it take Toyota to earn that reputation, or Honda to earn that reputation?
Well,
although I think Honda might be flaking on its both of them actually might be flaking on their reputation right now.
Toyota and Honda,
might be a great time for Volkswagen to sweep in.
Toyota and Honda were able to earn those reputations because American car companies gave them a huge assist by building the worst cars you could possibly imagine in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
So in comparison, the Japanese cars looked so good, and they continued to be built well throughout a very dark period of time. And you accrue a lot of goodwill in that. And once that happens, like, it takes a while to get rid of it. I mean, Mercedes was in a similar situation, and they coasted, and they kind of, when they focused on growth a little too much, they took their eye off the ball, and they had to burn through some of that goodwill. And Toyota has had
watered down their market a lot, right there.
Toyota has had to do the same. They've lost some of their goodwill as well under similar circumstances. Volkswagen was focused on growth at all costs for a while too, and it just didn't happen for them in this part of the world. So it's almost like growth is a poison. And once you're post-growth, I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, that's fair. That's a great point. I think this is obviously a more corporate perspective, right? Like that they are all trained to do better than the last year, to have improved sales over the last year. That takes a lot of focus off the product, I think, and off what the customers need and want.
And if you don't have, another factor too for Volkswagen is with European sales tanking, they don't have the money to make the changes they need to make. Right. So that makes it even more confusing as to why Buzz and ID7 aren't here.
Yeah. And it'll be curious to see if an electrified version of this Tiguan is on the table. I'm definitely going to be asking that because... I mean,
you've already identified it as the ID4. Right?
It's got to be. I think the ID4 looks a bit smaller than this.
But would you make two very, very similar SUVs, electric SUVs?
Well, is the ID4 is it as ubiquitous as the Ioniq where you live? Where you see? What do you see more of? To me, I see the Hyundais.
I see Hyundais way more, but that's a function.
I even see the Fords more than an ID4.
But that's a function of the fact that Ford and Hyundai sell way more cars than Volkswagen does in North America.
So again, it's just a bizarre. Should they just be the GTI and Golf R company? No, they can't do that. They can't just take their best product, and even if those are the best product, and sell that one.
I honestly couldn't tell you what their best product is. It's really hard to say.
What is the class leader in all of their cars?
Class leader.
We're gonna have to.
They don't have a single class leader.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I heard good things about the Taos. Have you driven the Taos in a while?
It's been a very long time.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're a Taos, you're up against stuff like the Kona, right?
And the Crosstrek.
And those are both very, very good.
And very popular, yes.
And have great reputations for reliability for the most part.
Yep.
And with the Kona, and here's another thing too. With the Kona and the Crosstrek, you can get enthusiast versions of each. Like one of them's the off-road wilderness version, and the other one is like the Kona, the N.
And yes.
So like there's room to grow within that lineup, and they do fun things, and there's interesting stuff. And you look at like a Taos or a Tiguan, and like you pointed out, there's one engine. Here you go. Hope you like it, you know?
And then so on the opposite end, you've got Volkswagen that goes, here's our car. We've got a cool car coming, this bus, for example. And then 5 years goes by. And we haven't seen
it's like the NSX
and you've forgotten about it.
It's the NSX of EVs, where like the concept undergoes like a generational change before it actually makes it to the market.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Which was supposed to be with a V10, I think, or V12 or something?
No, I think it was supposed to be a twin turbo V6 or something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then they ended up going with the crazy hybrid thing that they went with.
That's fair.
Super complicated.
Anyways, I can't wait to tell you more about what I see at the LA Auto Show.
Yeah.
But this is the main thing that I'm going to go and check out. And I do have a number of questions to hopefully identify while I'm there, and we'll talk about this.
Yeah,
next
why
week.
don't you ask Volkswagen all the questions we just asked and see what they say?
Of course, I will. I will probably not get invited back to another event. but why
Hashtag
not?
automotive journalism.
I don't mind. Why not? Well, as if there's going to be many Volkswagen events in the future, anyways. Whoa!
Wow! Wow! Okay, so that's the sign. That's the sound of Sammy's airline tickets for tomorrow, just incinerating on his desk as Volkswagen frantically makes phone calls to Air Canada. So Sammy will be talking about next week. Will be fun because he'll be talking about his experiences at the LA Auto Show, seeing all the new metal that's out there, and not like the corn new metal, the actual new metal you can drive. I'm going to be talking about some electrified metal again, but at this time it's the G80 Electrified, which is the all-electric version of the fantastic Genesis sedan. I drove this years ago. It's been a long time, and I'm able to put some serious miles on it. And I mean, my preview of next week's views is like, I don't understand why more luxury companies don't just do what Genesis did and make an electric version of a very successful gas car.
Right. That's fair.
If you want to ask Sammy, if you have any specific questions for Sammy while he's in LA, you can send us messages.
That's not going to work.
It's going to work because I'm going to time travel it. And
Okay.
we're going to, well, here's how it will work. We will ask those questions on the air.
Yeah.
After you come back.
And I'll answer them somehow.
You'll answer them because you're going to absorb absolutely everything there is to know about the LA
perfect.
Auto
I
Show.
can do that.
So you can get in touch with us in a bunch of ways. The easiest way is probably email Benjamin at benjaminhunting.com, or you can go onto the website unnamedautomotivepodcast.com, fill out the contact form and send us something there. You can also find us on social media, specifically Instagram. I'm at Hunting Benjamin. Sammy is at Sammy_ha, like you're laughing. Or you can find me on Blue Sky. It's the same thing, at Hunting Benjamin. Sammy, anything else you wanted to add this week?
No, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.